What's up, everybody? Welcome to Last Man Standing. I am Tony Farmer. He is Ryan Hogue, last man standing in the 2003 NFL Draft, drafted by the Raiders. We're back. Ryan, I think this is like episode 27 for us. The season is flying by. We're headed into week 13. And this is an exciting week to talk about Survivor, Circa Survivor, because it's the 13A, 13B week, where we've got the Thanksgiving slate, typically a lot of carnage that week, and then a fascinating slate on Sunday. Before we get to that, though, Ryan, how are you doing over there, man?
All good. I'm tired of seeing your face 27 times in a few months. That's a lot. That's a lot.
No kidding, man. No kidding. We've survived up until this point. You and I have, no pun intended. But let's look back on last week. We can't start this show without beginning with that Commanders loss to the Cowboys last week. Absolutely unbelievable. Not just the ending, Ryan, but throughout that game, you had Aubrey, best field goal kicker in the league, perhaps, missing 2 field goals. You had a blocked punt earlier, and then the crazy back and forth ending. What was your reaction to that game?
Well, I didn't get to see a ton of it in real time just because I was at the Raiders game doing my thing. But, the bits and pieces, when I would look it up, it looked like the Cowboys were kind of in charge and kind of, imprinting their, hands on the game. And then I was like, oh, wait, Washington now is deciding to show up. And then once again, it was like, okay, Dallas is in command. And then you see the game basically get tied at the end, and you're like, how did they go 90 yards? And then for it to end that way, heartbreak city for sure.
They had the onside kick. At that moment, when the onside kick is recovered by Dallas, you're like, game's over, I'm done. He returns the onside kick for a touchdown, which is a bad move, by the way. He should have slid it not one in the end zone. Imagine if you lose or advance in Survivor because of that. I mean, just so ridiculous. We had a comment here from Steven. Steven is still alive. Dolphins for the win. Only 54 people left. That's right, Steven. Only 53 people between you and $14 million. Goodness, I almost shorted you there. My bad. Unbelievable. So, Steven, let us know for Thanksgiving, since you're being open and telling us you're on the Dolphins. Did you have any decisions there? Who did you have left? I'm curious if it was an easy decision, if it was a hard decision. And anybody else that's still alive in Circa Survivor, speak up. Let's do a roll call here. Let's see who we're still rooting for, because Ryan and I do root for our listeners to do well in Circa Survivor. We want a winner from this show.
And Steven, if you're asking me my advice, I'm going to tell you what I told Tony at this very moment 1 year ago. Take that $200,000 and put it in your bank account right now. Take the money and run.
Yeah, feel free to let us know that too, Steven. Are you hedging? Are you selling percentages? Like, real curious to see what you're doing at this point. But congratulations on making it this far. That is a huge accomplishment.
Tony, before we go, can you explain, just in case people aren't as familiar with Circa, because Circa does it a little different than a traditional Survivor pool. Can you explain just quickly the nuanced approach and why they do the Thanksgiving as an additional week?
Yeah, it's pretty unique to their contest. At first, they started with just Thanksgiving. Then they added Christmas as well. And I think the reason that they do it, Ryan, is to weed the field out a little bit more. It also requires a whole bunch more strategy, because obviously those teams have more value throughout the year. But I think that if you didn't have Christmas and you didn't have Thanksgiving, the pool at the end would be a lot larger, and you'd have like 27 people splitting the pool and things like that. So by adding in these extra weeks, a lot more strategy, a lot harder to get to the end for certain. I mean, and this week, Ryan, is a great example of that, because if you're in a non-Circa Survivor league right now, that's easy. Chiefs, I'm feeling okay. You know what I mean? I'm feeling okay with the Lions this week. But now in Circa, those games, the only two that have a double-digit point spread, the Lions are a little under 10 now, but you get my point. You take those out, and now for Sunday, we've got one game with a point spread over 6 points. That's it. It's like, even if you have every team available on Sunday, it's still not an easy decision. And that game with a 7-point spread, there's a whole bunch of uncertainty. We'll talk about it later in the show.
What about the Buffalo Niners?
That's the one. That's the only one but that's got weather implications. That has injury implications on both sides. I can't wait to dig into that one with you for sure. But Ryan, here's my question before we really get into these games in depth. There are 5 people. I looked this up on Survivor Atlas. Amazing website, by the way. Go to survivoratlas.com. There are 5 people who have both Kansas City and Detroit available this week. If you're one of those 5 people, do you take Detroit and save Kansas City for Christmas against Pittsburgh? Or do you take Kansas City, which, at least according to the point spread, is a little safer this week?
Well, I mean, as you said, we'll get into it, but I actually think the Lions are in jeopardy of being upset this week.
Ooh, oh boy, I can't wait to get into it. House is also still alive right now. He said he's rolling with the Chiefs. Sunday is more interesting. Absolutely. I can't wait for Sunday. One more question for you, Ryan. Again, without giving too much away into your analysis later. 5 people have neither Kansas City or Detroit. Do you go Dallas, Green Bay, or other on Thanksgiving if you have neither of those teams available?
Wow.
Yeah. 5 people have this exact decision.
I mean, Miami Green Bay is not a game I would want to bet at all. And actually, of those 4 teams, who would I feel the most confident between Giants, Dallas, Green Bay, and Miami? I actually feel the most confident that Miami is going to win.
Oh, all right. Anybody out there who's watching our show who was feeling good about Green Bay going into this week, that may have just given them a little bit of pause here. This is from our friends over at Survivor Atlas. The number on the left, which is a little smaller, and honestly, I admit, a little hard to read, it says 69% for Kansas City. That's how many percentage of people have them available. Also from Survivor Atlas, these are the numbers, not percentages, but the actual numbers of the 54 remaining people who are alive on each of these entries. You can see 37 on Kansas City, 17 on the Lions. I got to figure all 17 or maybe 16 of the 17 that have Detroit are going to take Detroit this week. That seems to make sense to me. Kansas City is a little more ambiguous because you do have the ability to potentially use them on Christmas, especially for those people who have already burned Baltimore. So interesting to keep in mind. A couple other housekeeping items before we move on. If you're wondering when the selection counts are going to be released, Ryan and I won't be doing a show after the selection counts like we usually do on Saturdays. We won't be doing it Wednesday because it's going to be so darn late. It's going to be about 11 p.m. Pacific time. So that's about 2 a.m. Eastern time is when Circa on Twitter is going to announce all of those. I confirmed that today with Jeff Benson. So FYI on that. Couple other interesting angles here, Ryan. These are the only 4 people who have multiple entries left. You can ignore that week 12 column. That's old news. But these are the names of the people. You can see NFL Wise Guys. Poor fella. He lost 4 on the Commanders last week. So he's down to 2 entries. Wow. Nobody has more than 2 entries. So there's 54 entries left and 50 owners, 50 people left in this contest so far.
Really interesting, Tony, to see that every one of those had 10 entries to start, except one had 9. So,
yeah, good call. We got comments are flying in right now. Bob Renfro says, Love may want the turducken. Oh, Love as in Jordan Love. Nice. Okay. I like that. Later in the show, we're going to talk about this slate of games on Sunday, which is just going to be bonkers. I think there's going to be absolute carnage and bloodshed on Sunday. I'm struggling to find how to get rid of Bob's comment right now. There we go. I'm a little lost here, guys.
Tony, my question to you while you're figuring that out is taking the Chiefs this week, and I know one of our listeners already said that he was taking them. If you're playing the long game and you're going for the 14 million, let's put you in his shoes, right? Are you more likely to leave the Chiefs until Christmas? Whereas somebody like me that's more apt to sell early, would you say, you know what, I'm going to use the Chiefs now, knowing that I have a number in mind, maybe it's 400K, that if I get to, I'm just going to sell it at that. What's your thought process when it comes to that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Ron. I think it depends on what else you have left on Christmas. So my first question to someone in that position would be like, okay, what do you have available as options? You have Chicago, Do you have Seattle? If you're only left with like Kansas City and Pittsburgh, which I may be mistaken here, but I think that's the case for NFL wise guys. I think he only has Kansas City and Pittsburgh left.
I think you said that last week. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So long game, certainly saving Kansas City with a little bit more risk that you could be eliminated. Do you have Detroit available? That's certainly an option as well. How good do you feel about the Cowboys? How good do you feel about the Packers? Obviously you don't. So I think it just depends. It just depends. But certainly if you're like, hey, I just want to get out of this. I want to sell my entry next week. I want to, get some equity out of this. Taking the safer pick in Kansas City probably makes the most sense.
Who's our guy that has Kansas City?
Oh, Christian House says, like the Wolf on Wall Street guy said, I'm not fucking selling. Sorry, that distracted me. What was your question, Ryan?
So Christian's obviously not selling, but the person before that, I can't remember who. Steven Flores. All right. Well, hey, Steven, appreciate the love. But I'm curious, Steven, do you have, are you playing the long game? Are you going for that? You're just going to ride it until you do. Or are you do you have a number in mind? And once you hit that number, then you're going to sell. So, again, don't give up anything, strategically that might impact others, but we are curious and we like to speak on it. So.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into these Thanksgiving games. Tomorrow is going to be so much fun. We've got Bears at Lions. This point spread has been interesting. Looks like there's some Chicago money coming in. It was at 10.5 at one point, got all the way down to 8.5 at Circa today, and quickly bounced back up to 9.5. So there's obviously some love in the market for the Bears. How much do you trust Detroit here on Thanksgiving? By the way, Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, 0-3 straight up on Thanksgiving the last 3 years.
So I was thinking, obviously I played the majority of my career in the NFC North. And so I grew up a diehard Minnesota Viking fan. So I've been a part of back when it was the NFC Central and Tampa Bay was a part of it. Like I've paid attention to this specific division a long, long time. I'm going to the next 2 Vikings games because the Raiders are away and I'll be on the field and all the things. So NFC North is something that's near and dear to my heart. And so I really study these teams. And the thing that I keep coming to, Tony, is like when I look at the 4 quarterbacks and then they're all doing a better than respectable job. Like they're really rock solid across the board. But when I think about all 4 quarterbacks, I don't know that any of them really instills confidence in me when it comes to a big game, right? I mean, I look at Jared Goff. He's perennially, chokes under pressure. I look at Caleb Williams, and he's had such a roller coaster. He has all the talent in the world, but, not only does the offensive line not instill, confidence in me with him, but the fact that he changed coordinators, and although that seems to be going better, like there's something off with that offense. Sam Darnold will look like, a Pro Bowler one day and then play like he did against Jacksonville and essentially hand the game to Jacksonville. If anybody other than Mac Jones is the quarterback there, they win that game. And then lastly, Jordan Love. And Jordan Love, the same thing. Like he will make so many splash plays, but then he'll throw it up, at an inopportune time and give the ball away. So all 4 of those quarterbacks, like when I'm thinking about a Super Bowl leading, Super Bowl winning quarterback, I don't feel great about any of these. That's why I get a little skittish when it comes to putting my $14 million, possession on the line, saying, you know what, Goff's going to usurp Caleb Williams this week, or Love's going to usurp the Dolphins. Like I don't love any of those quarterbacks when it comes to picking. I think the Lions are ripe for an upset. I think Chicago is finally figuring itself out offensively. And I think they're actually trying to stay relevant in the playoff discussion. Obviously, Eberflus is playing for his coaching life. And it's, it's a Thursday game. And while we can't, run away from Thursday games this week because you have to pick it, it's one of those division battles on a short week. I'm staying away. And if I had to pick, I would pick Chicago.
Wow. And what do you mean? Point spread wise or straight up?
Straight up.
Holy smokes. Wow. Wow. Ryan going out on a limb there. Holy cow. Hey, the Lions lost on Thanksgiving last year as 8.5-point favorites
against the Packers, and you picked the Packers, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I was in the Survivor Atlas community warning people that the Packers were live for an upset. There's one player, I won't mention his name because I don't want to call him out or anything, but he was telling me I was stupid and all this stuff, and I was so wrong. And I got the last laugh on that one. So Ryan, do you think the Lions losing on Thanksgiving, is there an argument to be made that in a weird way that could actually help them this year? Because they're like, hey, we got embarrassed last year. We know how we messed up, whether it was the scheduling of the practices or whatever. We didn't take it as seriously. This year, we're going to fix that. Could like last year be a wake-up call? Is that possible?
I mean, I never am one to believe that a loss helps you unless you're undefeated and, kind of like the Chiefs. Like, I think that loss that the Chiefs made may have woke them up. Now, it didn't wake them up last week and they didn't look very good necessarily. But,
right.
I look at what they have coming down the pipe. They go home to the Packers, home to the Bills. Then they're at the Bears again, 49ers, Vikings. Like, they have a pretty brutal schedule coming up. So I don't think any loss, especially on national TV. But I will say people are, singing their praises and anointing them a Super Bowl ticket to New Orleans already. And so, that could be the, humble pie. Get it? Humble pie. Anyways, that they potentially need. But again, I'm not a believer in losses being a good thing. But again, I really do believe that the Bears will split with them this year. And I could see it on national TV with everybody watching.
We got a question here from Christian. What percentage does Survivor Sweat take out of your sales? That's 3% is the answer to that question. And we're going to go talk a little bit more about Survivor Sweat later in the show. So stay tuned for that. Ryan, a couple injuries to be aware of in this game. And they kind of go to your point about Detroit maybe being ripe for an upset here. Khalif Raymond is out. He's a backup wide receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown practiced in full this week. May not be 100%, but it's looking like he's going to play. But more importantly, Taylor Decker, the tackle for the Lions, is out, already ruled out in this game. Chicago's pretty healthy on the other side. So the health factor is definitely on Chicago's side in this one for certain. Don't mean to make you nervous out there if you're planning on using Detroit, but be careful. It's a division game at the end of the day. Moving on. Dallas at the Giants. Big news here is it's looking like Drew Lock is going to start in this game, at least according to Adam Schefter as of 4 hours ago. They said it's a long shot for DeVito to play. Drew Lock has been a mediocre quarterback his entire career, and that might be friendly of a word. However, I will say this. He had one good start at the end of last year. It was Monday Night Football when he played for Seattle, maybe against Pittsburgh, I think. I might be getting the team wrong, but he had a really solid outing in that game. Got himself a decent little $5 million contract to back up the Giants. What do you think about Drew Lock in this game against the Cowboys?
I'm feeling feisty, Tony. I think upset alert for this game as well. Drew Lock is out to prove a point, and the reason he was benched was so they wouldn't allow him to reach certain incentives. That's real. That is the business side of the NFL. That's just, a terrible look for the NFL and the sad reality of what they do as, they treat us like business commodities. I think Drew Lock is trying to show a middle finger to everybody that's hated on him this year, especially the upper management, because now they're kind of put into a rock and a hard place, and they kind of have to start him. They really don't have anybody else to put in that spot. And when you look at Dallas, in years past, they've been so dominant on the offensive and defensive lines. Well, guess what? Giants' best part of them is their defensive line. They will dominate the line of scrimmage. Dallas is already unable to run the football, right? So now the Giants can pin their ears back and really collapse that pocket. Yeah. I like them being able to put, Cooper Rush in a tough situation. Tight ends are going to be a key. If Dallas can utilize those, they have a shot. But I think they take CeeDee Lamb and neutralize him to a degree. I think Malik Neighbors is out and out to prove a point on national TV that he's better than CeeDee Lamb. And the first time these two played, it was a last possession type game. That's when Malik, I think, got his concussion, right?
That sounds right. Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was. I think it maybe a Sunday night game or something like that. But and they were going down, and then Malik got hurt on the last possession for them to go in and tie the game or win the game. But that was a fully healthy Dallas team. Obviously, they're not, or at least offensively, Dallas was more healthy. And again, I just think New York, if they are to win another game this year, it would be this one.
It's interesting you mentioned the Cowboys tight ends because Jake Ferguson didn't practice this week. I thought, and I could be wrong, I got to double check this. I thought I saw that he might have already been ruled out for that game. That might be premature on my part, but I do know he missed practice. So keep an eye on the health of him either way. Cowboys got Deron Bland back last week. That's absolutely huge, but I think Diggs is going to be out again for them. So still not at full strength in that secondary. Ryan's got 2 upset alerts so far. I love it. And I already know you like an upset in the next game too, man. Holy cow, we're going to have 4 upsets on Thanksgiving. Miami at Green Bay. We all know the narratives with Tua. 0-7, that goes back to college with Alabama, about him not playing well in cold games. It is going to be temperatures around 30 degrees in this one. He came out and said he can't wait to destroy the narrative or something like that. So he's saying bring on the cold weather. Dolphins are playing a lot better lately. And what I'm seeing from the Dolphins, Ryan, is a team that has had a huge shift in philosophy on offense lately. They're an explosive team. Obviously, we all know what they can do with Waddle and Hill and Tua. And I think defenses have said, you're not going over the top of us. We're going to take that away. And so the Dolphins finally have said, fine, we're just going to take what you give us underneath. You saw Patrick Mahomes do this a couple of years ago too. And the benefactor of this has been Jonnu Smith. 15 catches, 188 yards, 3 touchdowns on 19 targets over the last 2 games. Well, the Packers are one of the worst teams in the NFL defending tight ends. I believe they rank 30th, maybe 28th, but they're definitely one of the worst. So I think this could be a nice breakout spot for Jonnu Smith in this game. Tell me why you like Miami for an upset here.
Well, that's a great little nugget about their lack of ability to cover tight ends. To your point, Mike McDaniel's kind of switched to the death by 1,000 paper cuts offense. And, whereas they've been so run a bit in the years past, they've been really able to attack you on the run, which has opened up their big play action pass and deep shots. They're not running the football. Now they're just doing real simple, like getting the ball out of Tua's hands quickly. They're being exotic in their formations, which they've always been. They've been exotic in their motions and shifts, but they're doing a ton of wide receiver screens. They're doing just the staple of West Coast offense, right? 3 steps, get the ball out. 3 steps, get the ball out. And teams, because they have to play that too high shell to respect their speed, they're leaving in between the hashes, which just like chess, I grew up, I was captain of my chess team. If you can control the middle of the board, you win in chess. If you can control the middle of the field in football, you're going to win. And the Dolphins have really done a nice job of controlling, and that's why Jonnu Smith has had so much success. I noticed for Green Bay that no Romeo Doubs tomorrow.
Yep, huge.
No Jair Alexander, and then one of their starting linebackers is out as well. That's a big deal. Jair Alexander is one of the best corners in the league, and then Romeo Doubs obviously is one of their big play guys. And then I look at Miami's defense, and it didn't allow New England. And I know New England's, what they are offensively. They didn't get into the red zone a single time last week. And this is after Miami put up 34 points against them. They didn't allow them to get into the red zone once. Obviously, they gave up a big play late and a few field goals. But, that tells me that they're starting to figure it out. They're starting to gel. Bob Renfro, shout out soccer, because I come from a soccer background. So love that. Again, Tua's got to change the narrative. Tyreek Hill's got to change the narrative of playing in the cold. And although this will probably feel like a summer day compared to what they played in Kansas City last year, 35, once you get lathered up, it's actually really good football weather. It's good hitting weather. It's not very good for fans, but I don't know. I would stay away from this game, but if I had to pick, I'm thinking Miami, because Miami is hanging on by a thread, trying to stay relevant in a very soft number 7 seed. That bubble wild card. They got to catch the Broncos. So
yeah, definitely have the motivation. Of all the teams playing on Thanksgiving on tomorrow, Dolphins actually have the best winning percentage on Thanksgiving Day. It's only 5-2. It's a small sample size, but you think, Dolphins on the road this time of year, but they've actually done quite well on Thanksgiving Day. And we all remember the Leon Lett game in 1993, Ryan. I know you remember that one too.
Oh, yeah.
That's a core memory for me. Thanksgiving Day, watching Leon Lett flounder on the ground with the snow flying all over the place. Good stuff. Good call on Romeo Doubs being out. Had a concussion last week. I think that is a huge absence for the Packers. Everybody says, they're deep at wide receiver. They're not going to miss him that much. No, that's a huge, huge miss for them. And good call on Jair Alexander being out. All good things to know. Next day, Black Friday, Raiders at Chiefs. You do the pregame show for the Raiders. These two teams played earlier this year. 27-20 was the final. The Raiders had less than 2 yards a carry in that game. I want to say, I'm pretty sure on this, it was 1.6 yards per carry for the entire game. No semblance of a running game whatsoever. Raiders are banged up at cornerback. They're also banged up at the running back position. Do the Raiders have a shot here to upset the Chiefs?
Well, ironically, I'm going to be on my radio show in an hour and a half talking in depth about this, and I'll post that on Twitter if anybody wants to follow along and they want to hear more about this game. But for me, the fact that you brought up running back, Amir Abdullah is, looked probably the best of any of the running backs have last week. And so the fact that, Madison is out and Zamir White, or Madison is questionable, I guess, and Zamir White is out, that to me doesn't make a difference. I will say that their two best corners, Hobbs and Bennett, are out, and they've just been out, downgraded to out for Friday. That's a bigger deal. And you saw what Denver was able to do as far as kind of carving up the defense. I can only imagine what Patrick Mahomes is going to do. I will say that last year, on Christmas Day, obviously that was kind of Antonio Pierce's signature win, beating the Kansas City and got him his job, to be honest. They did so with a defensive score. They did so with, I think they passed for 60 yards in that game because they were able to run the football. Zamir White actually ran for maybe 140 or so yards in that game. I don't foresee that happening, although their interior offensive line is finally connected, and this will be the third straight game they're playing together. Their offensive line has finally come together. With all that being said, 3 is the number to be mindful of. They've gotten 20 points twice this year, the Raiders. They need to get to 20 to be able to beat the Chiefs, because the Chiefs on their worst day are going to score 20 points. And so for me, my mindset for the Raiders is if they get into the red zone, there's no such thing as a field goal. They are just going to have to, what do they have to lose? They just need to say, Daniel Carlson, unless we're kicking a 50-yard field goal, we are going to go touchdown or nothing, or they're going to have to drive the rest of the field. It's going to be 30 degrees at kickoff. So again, and it could be windy in Arrowhead. So that's something to be mindful of. But the one thing about Aiden O'Connell, and I know that I think it was Steven said that he's a downgrade to Gardner Minshew, which I believe he is. But Aiden O'Connell, what he does well is he gets the ball out of his hands. He has no ability to extend plays. He's not good on the edge, so they're not going to do a lot of play action or anything like that. But what he does really well, he predetermines where he's going to throw it, and he gets it out quick. Scott Turner, since they changed their offense, that's what they are doing. They are turning into a 3-step drop, get rid of the ball, give Brock 15, 16 targets in the game. And if not, we don't have receivers that have enough wiggle to beat people deep. So they're getting the ball out quick. Aiden O'Connell, actually, this plays into his hands very well. And if they can sustain drives, I think, which I think they can, right, in between the 20s, whether or not now, last week they're one of 5 in the red zone. So I don't know, if that's suddenly going to change. But I think at least in between the 20s, they'll be able to move the ball against the Chiefs. And if they can win the time of possession, I feel like it'll at least be dangerously close into the third quarter. But ultimately, I see the Chiefs winning. I don't know if they'll cover. I feel like the Chiefs would win something like 28-20, 28-19, something like that.
Yeah, I heard someone else on another podcast, I don't remember who it was, earlier this week, say something to the effect of, I've never been less confident in a 13-point favorite. And because of the way the Chiefs have been playing, sort of playing down to their competition, and the fact that the Raiders only lost by 7 earlier this year, and you had that big win last year on Christmas, it does sort of give you some pause despite the point spread, despite the money on line on this one's a little scary. Amenahu, the defensive end who's been out all year for the Chiefs, he is expected back in this one. So Chiefs are getting him and Pacheco back this week. So Chiefs are getting healthier while the Raiders are having health problems. So
And I
put a little check mark in the health column for Kansas City too.
And I will say I was in the locker room after the game this week, and there was exactly one person that was pissed, and that was Amir Abdullah. And he had probably the best game of any of the Raiders, ironically. You can tell a lot by a team, right? And the kind of the standard they're expecting. Like if you walk into Pittsburgh and they've lost a game, right, against an undefeated team, they would all be pissed because Mike Tomlin, right, he talks about the standard being the standard. When I walk into the Raiders, it was kind of a, not necessarily a woe is me, but I mean, there were guys quickly getting out of the locker room, just being like, I don't want to talk to anybody. Not because they were upset, but just because they were like, and it was just kind of just this woeful, like, oh, shucks, here we go again. And that to me, like, tells a lot. The fact that they've lost 7 straight now and have not had a players only meeting, like, what are we doing? Like, I mean, somebody's got
leaders on that team that should be calling that. Yeah.
No, like this is absolutely unacceptable. So they'll always get up to play Chiefs because the Chiefs are their number one, But I mean, Antonio Pierce today in his press conference is like, let's call a spade a spade. The best team's playing the worst team. He called his team the worst team in the league. And, I don't know if I'm hearing that from my coach, I don't know if that's going to be like, you know what, hey, I'm going to go play harder for Coach Pierce. But so we'll see. But I would feel pretty good as a Chiefs fan. But again, it's a short week and it's a division rivalry. You just never know.
Yeah, good call. And I like Steven pointing out all that drama with the Kermit doll, with the Mahomes jersey in the offseason. We talked about that when these two teams played each other the first time. Honestly, I was expecting the Chiefs to slap them in the mouth that game and win by 3 or 4 touchdowns. But maybe it's just going to be a delayed revenge here this week, because with the Raiders being banged up, there is that kind of potential. But there is also the potential for the Raiders to be right in this game. The one thing that I find intriguing about this matchup, Ryan, and tell me if you disagree, the 2 best players on the Raiders, Crosby and Bowers, actually match up really well with the Chiefs, because the Chiefs don't have good tackles. They're better on the interior of their offensive line. And the Chiefs, by the way, no team in football has given up more yards to tight ends than the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's like, if you want something to hold on to for hope for the Raiders, it's that Crosby and Bowers can just have one of those games where they just take over and they go off. And that's always possible when you have superstars like that.
Yeah, and Crosby, he hurt himself week 2 with a high ankle sprain and really has not been himself this year. I mean, I think he's gone 4 games now without a sack. I will say he's leading the league in tackles for loss. And last week, his Pro Football Focus grade was over 90. So he's starting to come back and you can see the juices there, but there's so much attention being placed on him. And now because the corners are playing a little softer because we don't have those man-to-man cover guys, that it makes his job exponentially harder. So I think some of that negates it just because our secondary can't cover man-to-man to give him that extra half second to sack him.
I'm going to tease people here, something we're going to talk about later in the show. You mentioning Crosby's injury reminded me of some news that I saw today. A huge NFL superstar who hasn't been having a good year revealed today that he's been playing on a fractured ankle since week 4. Don't say it if you know who it is, Ryan. We're going to get to that momentarily. First, though, let's go ahead and talk about Survivor Sweat. If you're watching this and you're like, man, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of Steven. I'm jealous of House. I'm jealous of these people that are still alive in Circus Survivor. I want a chance at $14.26 million. Well, here's how you can get into it. Go to survivorsweat.com, click on the marketplace. These are some of the more expensive ones here. 10% of an entry for $22,000, 1% for $2,400. We've got 4% for $9,600, 2% for $48,000, $7,200 for 3%, 2% for $5,000, 10% for $18,000, another 10% for $18,000. Remember, you can go to Survivor Sweat, guys. You can click on these entries and see which teams have been used up. Make sure they still got like a Baltimore or a Kansas City for Christmas. See who their Thanksgiving options are, etc. We've got $7,200 essentially for 3%, 4% for 11 grand. The big boy right there, 99% for 134 grand. I don't know what teams they've used. You got to go on and check it out, but that's a huge bargain because just in terms of the value of the entries right now, it's over 200,000. That's a really good deal right there, assuming they have some decent teams left. 10% for 18 grand, 50% for 67 grand, quarter of an entry for 35 grand, 50 grand for 15, 10% for 35 grand. We're almost there, a couple more, 4% for 10 grand, 225,000 for 90%, another big boy, 3% for 6,700, 9%, that's a funny number, for 35 grand, two more, 35 grand for 9%, $2,300 for 1%, and then $2,500 for 1% and $6,600 for 3%. So go over to Survivor Sweat. They do other stuff other than the marketplace, by the way. They've got articles over there, a bunch of resources for you. So go ahead and check out survivorsweat.com. We love them here on this show.
Tony,
we have another comment here. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
I wonder if those 99% are any of the people that have multiple entries.
Yeah, good call. I'm curious too. That's a good way to do it. Sell one of your entries, hog some equity, and then forge ahead when you're already, up a lot of money, kind of playing with house money at that point. I like it. Steven commented and said he's been selling pieces on Survivor Sweat. He reached out to Jeff Benson over at Circa about starting up credit to hedge. And then, this was Steven's comment that happened already. All right, moving on to the Sunday slate, which again, Ryan, is a very interesting slate. Only one game over a 6-point spread, and that game has a whole bunch of question marks with it. So let's go ahead and get into it. Titans at Commanders. I'm going to need to pull up this graphic to remind myself, how many people even have the Commanders available here? 19 people have Washington available. Interesting spot to use them because Washington's on a losing streak right now. Washington is one Hail Mary away from being 6-6. The Titans played really good, not just last week, but the week before. I think it was against the Vikings, maybe 2 weeks before. That was a game they could have definitely beat the Vikings. So Titans are playing a lot better lately. Washington's playing a lot worse lately, even though Washington has a better record. Titans are playing better football right now. Would you trust Washington week 13?
Well, I just want to say as a whole, like the Sunday slate of games, excellent. Like even the bad teams are playing. Like these are all going to be really, really good games to watch. I think this is a potential trap game for Washington. I could see a lot of people actually on Washington for this one, but Washington's really struggled, Tony, against physical defenses. And they're going to have to win at the line of scrimmage or else they're going to fail. Otherwise, I feel like there's too much being put on Jaden Daniels. And you saw even last year in games, LSU lost, like when there was too much on his plate. Like it was, he would try to go into God mode. And, that's a big ask in a game when you need 10 other guys to do their job. I did like that Marshawn Lattimore is finally practicing with the team. Now, whether or not he plays, that's something I'm definitely keeping an eye on. But if Lattimore plays, I feel good about Washington because I feel like he can neutralize Ridley. I've talked so much about the importance of when you have a Revis Island type guy, and not that I'm comparing Marshawn Lattimore to Darrelle Revis, but he is a shutdown corner that follows and travels with the best receivers. If that is the case and you can take Ridley out, I really feel like Tennessee becomes, a limited offense becomes even worse, and Washington finds a way to win. If he does not play, I am thinking that this is going to be a 3-point game, field goal affair, and I'm fascinated.
Well, the deadline to put your picks in for Sunday is Saturday. So you should know by then, I'm talking to the audience there, you should know by then if Lattimore is in or out. And hey, if you're playing the last man standing drinking game at home, whenever Ryan brings up an elite number 1 cornerback, go ahead and take a drink. I know you love to talk about them. It is a big deal. It is important. Lattimore hasn't played since he joined Washington. I think there's an emotional lift there too. Almost like the hero with the cape is coming to save us. We're sliding, but we got Marshawn Lattimore back. Almost like the 49ers should have had when they got Christian McCaffrey back. It never really turned out that way, but I think that Lattimore can be a huge, huge lift for them. Very good point on your part. Joseph Kelly says, is Survivor Sweat legal in all 50 states? Yeah, to my knowledge, it is. You're not gambling with Survivor Sweat. You're buying an entry so that you can gamble. And whoever's entry you're buying has already gone through the legal process of getting a proxy so that they can enter the tournament. You have to be in Las Vegas in order to enter the Circa Survivors contest. You have to go to them. You can't do it from out of state, but the proxy makes it legal, and the person that you'd be buying an entry from has a proxy to make that legal. So hopefully I answered that question all right for you. So,
speaking of which, Tony, I never got an answer to the question last Saturday when people were asking, once they open up different circas, are you able to enter the contest? I don't have an answer yet, but it did not get forgotten.
Gotcha. Okay. Good. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because we thought that you might be running into Derek at the event that you were going to for people that missed last Saturday's show. Gotcha. All right. Moving on here. Chargers at Falcons. I don't think we need to spend too much time on this one because I think you'd be pretty crazy to want to trust either of these teams in Circa Survivor with this much money on the line. But the Falcons are coming off a bye week. Chargers are on a short week. So there is a huge rest advantage that we need to point out here. Chargers coming off. Some people would say that was an ugly loss to the Ravens. I would say they were really right in that game. The Ravens were like 3 for 3 on fourth down. Quentin Johnson dropped a couple passes. That game could have easily gone the other way. So I don't think that game was as ugly as the score indicated. But in any case, I couldn't trust the Chargers or the Falcons here in this spot with $14 million in the line. Ryan, could you?
Yeah, great game, but not a great betting game. I will say this, LA's schedule, man, from a short week having to travel all the way to Atlanta, then all the way back, then they got to go to Kansas City. Like, I think Harbaugh's looking at this and recognizing, like, hey, this is a big game for us. The Falcons, and we talked about it after week 1, they were the only team in the NFL that was worse than the Raiders in terms of number of times they did play action pass, which was 0 week 1 against Pittsburgh. If you go all the way back to week 1, they're finally allegedly going to get back into play action. And that's one of the things Kirk Cousins, as a Minnesota Viking follower for so many years, that's one of the things he does really, really well. And especially with Bijan Robinson, it makes no sense to not do more play action pass. They're allegedly getting back to it. I would like to see them get back to it because they were one of my kind of, sneaky NFC championship teams. I think both teams are desperate for a win. My question to you, Tony, where's DJ Shark? Why hasn't he played this year for the Chargers? I know he was banged up early, but I feel like that is exactly what they need, and he hasn't got any run.
Well, especially with Johnston struggling. And I don't know his history. I don't know if that guy's used to dropping passes, but that was a really ugly look. McConkey's playing really well for the Chargers. But that's a good call out on Shark. I don't even know if he's hurt or if they're deciding not to play him. Harbaugh, as you know, people can get in his doghouse pretty easily. And maybe it's a situation like that, totally speculating, but that can be the case as well. I'd have to look that up and dig a little deeper. I kind of forgot about that guy, to be honest, totally fell off my radar. We had a comment here from Steven. It says the suspense is building. I promise you, we're going to talk in depth about this 49ers game. It will be a little bit further toward the end of the show, though. Ryan, I'm gonna go back. I said nobody's gonna take the Chargers at Falcons. I still think that's the case. But we need to talk strategy here for a second. Because if someone were to take the Bengals next game that we're going to talk about, they're a short favorite. I think the gut reaction would be to say, oh, you're crazy. This person is so stupid. Like when those 2 people took the Browns a couple weeks ago and ended up getting knocked out with less than 100 people to go. There is some method to this madness. And let's go back to Thanksgiving, right? You saw those numbers, how many people had Kansas City, how many people had Detroit. If someone were to take Miami, who you love, and Miami wins, that means obviously automatically the 7 or 8 people on Green Bay lose automatically. That's the way to win this contest tomorrow. I'm not saying you should do it, but that would be the reasoning why someone would do it, why someone would. Even Dallas, I think there's going to be single digits on Dallas. So imagine how good it's going to feel when those entry counts come out later tonight. Say there's 9 people on Dallas, 6 people on Dallas, and you're like, shit, all I need to be a millionaire is for Detroit to lose, Kansas City to lose, and Dallas to win. And at that point, it's hedging time. It's chopping time. You're in the money essentially at that point, indirectly. So if you see someone do something crazy when these selection counts come out tonight, maybe someone with 2 entries puts one on the Giants. Maybe someone with 2 entries puts one on the Dolphins. It's not as stupid or as crazy as it looks. There's a method to it. I don't know if we're going to see that, but I'm fascinated to see.
So, Tony, are you saying if you had 2 entries right now, live, you would put one on Kansas City, and then the other you would go ballsy like a Miami? Not that you like Miami, but we'll just say, would you?
I wouldn't do it. It's not my style, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I agree with Steven.
These are gamblers. These are poker. They're the poker community has gotten into Circa Survivor now. I mean, these are people who are making calculated risks. So it's not a stupid idea. It's game theory. And we may see something like that when selection counts come out. And I'm telling you, that one person that's on Miami, even though they had favorites available, is not an idiot. And by the way, we also have, let me read you this too. We have one person who has no Dallas, no Kansas City, no Detroit. They're either going to go Green Bay or an underdog. And then we have one person that has Green Bay, Kansas City, and Detroit used up. So they're either going to go Dallas or an underdog. So maybe it's someone like that that gets frisky, that says, you know what? I've only got one favorite left and I don't like it. That's the kind of person who you might see take an underdog if this happens. It's going to be fascinating to see. We got a little comment here from Steven. Steven says is that people try so hard to be on an island without taking into account how likely it is that team is going to win. The Browns were a terrible pick. And when that one person picked the Browns, then look over and see someone else is on the Browns, that hurts. House says, since Kansas City will be about 55%, if you're going to go dog, Las Vegas is best EV. I see what you're saying there, because if your game wins, you guarantee knock out a huge chunk of the pool. People have done this in Circa Survivor before, maybe not with a 13-point spread, but I remember 3 years ago when Dallas was a big favorite over the Raiders, like 7-point favorite against the Raiders. A couple people took the Raiders and it paid off handsomely for them. So go ahead, Ryan.
The only way I would, and I wouldn't pick the Raiders in this week, but the only way I would do something where I would pick a Pittsburgh, Cincinnati or something like that is if I sold 40% of my entry for 100,000 and I knew I was good with 100K and I got that this week. And now I'm just playing essentially with the casino's money. Like that would be my only thought of like going super risky. If I knew I had 6 figures banked and I could now go from there, like that, again, that would be the only reason. Otherwise I'm going to just keep doing, my game theory and probability stat and all these things. So
Ryan, imagine though that you're the guy on the other end of that. You buy your entry, someone pays you $100,000 and they look at the entries and they're like, my guy that I just gave $100,000 to is on Miami. Yikes. That might not be a good feeling for them, but I hear what you're saying. Once you have that money in the bank, you can start playing a little bit more risky. Absolutely. All right, moving on here. Steelers, Bengals. Bengals are a 3-point favorite. Last I looked anyways. I wonder if the Steelers are feeling a little disrespected when this point spread came out. The Bengals are off of a bye here. Their offense is playing really good. Ryan, if the Bengals had a better record, Joe Burrow would absolutely be in the top 3 conversation for MVPs in the league. I think he's got 27 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He is playing elite football right now. Is he playing good enough to trust him against the good Steelers team in Survivor?
Well, I think he's good enough to beat him, but why bet this game when there's so many other tasty matchups? I think it's going to be a fascinating game. Both teams have extra rest. Remember, Pittsburgh played on Thursday night, so both teams are getting, they should be as healthy as they're going to be. I'm wondering if Highsmith's going to play because obviously those tackles are a little bit of a liability for Joe Burrow. And when you can, crash down with opposite TJ Watt, you're going to probably do pretty well against that team. The cold, it is going to be cold. That's advantage Pittsburgh. And just because I feel like they have a little more dynamic offense and ability to be multidimensional. But I'm staying away from this game. I think it's going to be a great game. Cincinnati playing for their playoff lives and Pittsburgh trying to stay in front of Baltimore to win the division and host a playoff game. So it's going to be like a playoff game, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, good call. Next game up, Colts, Pats. I think there's going to be a couple people on Indianapolis in this one. You might not love that, Ryan, because I know you're not a big Anthony Richardson fan, but the Patriots were so bad last week, particularly on the offensive line, not just with blocking, but like penalties at the wrong time and stuff like that. I think some people who have the philosophy that you want to beat up on the worst teams have identified the Patriots as one of the worst teams in the NFL. And if you're someone like me who is mapping things out early in the season, the Colts at Patriots was a game that jumped out to you week 13 right off the board. It may not look quite as tasty now, but would you trust Indianapolis here against the Patriots in this spot?
Well, I will say I think New England at least covers. They're at home and it's going to be cold, so that tells me it's going to be a defensive battle. I think the New England defense is going to give Anthony Richardson fits. I like New England actually in a field goal battle, and I think they win something like 15-9. But so I would stay away from this game first and foremost. But if I was betting it, I would absolutely bet New England.
Yeah, spread in that one's around 3. So if it was 15-9, they wouldn't cover the spread. But I hear what you're saying. It's going to be a close game.
No, I think New England wins straight up.
Oh, you think New England wins the game?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, New England 15-9. Okay, I understand now. Gotcha. Man, lots of upsets this week. It's going to be a good week for the sports books if Ryan is even 50% right this week. So should be fascinating to watch. Ryan, you got to give someone a game that they feel comfortable with this week. I know it's a crazy one, but you're throwing out lots of warnings, rightfully so, with good justification. But I wonder if there's a game that you do feel good about taking a favorite in as we move along. Texans at Jaguars. Is that the game? CJ Stroud is not playing his best football. The Texans got healthy this week on defense, finally, but ended up losing to the Titans. And in the process, took out our buddy Mike Buckmiller, who was on the show from Survivor Sweat. He was on our show. He's a great guest, one of the nicest guys. Hated to see them lose. By the way, last week took out, I believe, 4 former Survivor champions. So a lot of sharps were knocked out of the pool last week. Ryan, would you trust the Texans here in this spot on the road against the Jaguars?
I would. And although Houston usually plays close games with Jacksonville, and I'm certainly watching and monitoring Trevor Lawrence and whether he plays, which it looks like he's probably going to play. But those detractors out there that say Trevor Lawrence is overrated or not very good, like all you have to do is look at their offense with him and without him. And you can really recognize like he was making the most out of a pretty bad situation. I like that Houston's finally figuring it out defensively. Like you said, they've gotten healthier. And I feel like DeMeco Ryans, with all his guys, has finally rallied the troops. Their offensive line, though, is awful, right? I mean, Houston's offensive line is one of the worst in the league. And that is a problem because they have a really good running back. They're just not able to run consistently. When you can't run consistently, you leave CJ Stroud trying to do too much. And he doesn't look like the same player last year because, I think he might be banged up a little bit more than he's leading on. But secondly, they're 5 and 7 step drops and he's getting hit a lot in these games. And without Diggs, right? I mean, and they're not utilizing their tight end. I'm a big fan of utilizing screen passes and tight ends. They don't do it enough. Jacksonville, like I said, usually plays them tough. But the one thing to be mindful of, not a lot of people have Houston left to pick.
Mm-hmm.
So
4 people. Yep.
Yeah, that's
I think the lowest team available left. And if you have Houston at this point, let's be honest, it's probably because you're saving them for Christmas, even though they might be a dog in that game. Always nice to have backup plans as well. Cardinals at Vikings. You're a Vikings guy. You played for them. Would you trust the Vikings in this spot against Kyler Murray and the Cardinals?
Whew. I will say this: running quarterback always has the chance to kind of negate those exotic looks or pressure looks that a team like Minnesota has. A team like the Jets, for example, when they played in London against Minnesota, right? Aaron Rodgers doesn't move very well anymore. And you saw that like that defense gave him fits and they were a nightmare on offense. Ironically, they still had a chance to win at the end of the game. Whereas Kyler Murray, when he breaks contain or breaks, out, when he goes off scripted plays, like that's actually when he performs his best. And that's when the Vikings are the most vulnerable, right? The Vikings want to confuse you to make you make a quick decision and make a mistake. Kyler Murray does a really good job of extending plays and either running or, throwing a deep pass and making a play that you didn't expect. And that can be the ultimate neutralizer when it comes to a really good Brian Flores defense. I think Jefferson probably will have a monster day. They've been kind of keeping him at bay.
and taking him out. And therefore, Darnold's done a nice job of getting Hawkinson and other guys involved. But again, it's Sam Darnold. Like, I don't feel great about putting my $14 million entry on him any given week. So I'm probably staying away. I think this could be a Vikings win by 8 points, but I also could see the Cardinals winning at the buzzer on a walkaway 3 because they feel like, or a field goal, because I feel like they always play Arizona really, really close. And I think it was either a year ago or 2 years ago, like Arizona just gave it to Minnesota and just gave them fits down in Arizona. And that's for whatever reason, it keeps bringing up into the back of my mind. Kyler did a really nice job in that game. So be wary of Minnesota if this is your horse you're riding.
Yeah, and I say be wary of Minnesota also because they looked better last week, although they almost gave that game away to the Vikings. The 2 games before that, I think I said on last week's show, they really didn't look good. They didn't deserve to win those 2 games against weaker opponents. So they haven't been consistent all year, which is a little bit of a concern for the Vikings. Seattle against Aaron Rodgers. You just brought his name up. Jets are off of a bye. I don't know if that's going to be enough to help them regroup. Jets have been probably definitely one of the most disappointing teams in the NFL all season long. Seattle's defense is starting to play a lot better, particularly against the run the last couple of weeks after they made some changes, cut one of their linebackers. They made a trade for a linebacker a couple of weeks before that. And so their defense is playing a lot better. Would you trust them here against the Jets in New York?
Stay away. Stay away game. I have no clue if the Jets have quit. Fully healthy, this would be a really fun game, Tony. I think you would admit. Jets secondary versus the Seahawks receivers.
Yep.
Really, really good at all their positions there. But it's a long way to travel for a game for Seattle. So I don't feel great about Seattle, but I also don't know like what the Jets plan is. And it's, with their owner's comments that he's come out. I mean, it seems like it's a mess. Seattle is playing for, they have the division lead right now.
Yep.
And so it means more to them. But again, it's a long way to travel. The Jets could finally look like they're supposed to, but I feel like we've been waiting a long time this year for them to actually show up, and they haven't. So I'm staying away from this game.
Yeah, I don't like trusting a team that's underperformed all year long off of a bye week. Yep. It just creates the possibility that they could figure something out with those 2 weeks, especially a team that lost its coach earlier this year. Maybe that's just what the doctor ordered. Next up, we've got the Bucs at Panthers. This should be a fun game. The Panthers are playing a lot better recently. Bryce Young isn't lighting the world on fire, but he's actually looking like a competent quarterback the last 3 weeks, playing a lot better. Remember, Dave Canales, the coach of the Panthers, was the coach, offensive coordinator for the Bucs. He knows Baker Mayfield really well. He knows that Bucs defense really well because he coached against it every day in practice. He knows that personnel well. And remember when we had Mike Tice on the show last week, he talked about when a coach is facing a team, they can do some things and say, hey, this guy's a bad tackler. I'm going to attack him. This guy doesn't like to do this. So there is that angle to be aware of here for the Bucs. Be careful with this game. Would you trust Tampa Bay over Carolina here? This is probably going to be one of the most selected games in Circa on Sunday.
Yeah, I trust Tampa because I think Baker Mayfield's playing at a Pro Bowl level. And I think that Mike Evans is a difference maker. And obviously still Chris Godwin, they're gonna feel that. And I think that's going to be the reason they probably don't make the playoffs. But you don't beat the brakes off somebody like they did against the Giants, even though the Giants are a mess in the NFL. It just doesn't happen. These guys are professionals. And the way they did that from both an offense and defensive standpoint, just dominated both sides of the ball, was really, really impressive. I still think Carolina's below average. And yes, the coach knows the personnel. I get it. And yes, they always play Tampa Bay close. I get it. But Tampa really needs to win to keep the pressure on Atlanta. They're a game behind them. And Atlanta actually has one of the, or I guess compared to Tampa, has a harder schedule moving forward. So I think Tampa is holding out hope they could be division champ still. This is one of those, would I be shocked if Tampa Bay won in a shootout or, by double digits? No. But would I be shocked if Carolina kept it close and it came down to a field goal at the end? No. So again, but we are at week 13. Like, you're going to have to go on a limb some places. Division battles are not normally, especially on the road, places I like to go. But this is one of the ones I feel a little better about just because of how important it is to Tampa.
And I like Steven's comment here. He says he's basically trying to decide between the Bucs and the Bills. It sounds like, I think there's a lot of people in that position. And I think it's important to remember how those teams finish this season. Tampa Bay finishes with Carolina and New Orleans the last 2 weeks. Carolina in Tampa Bay this time. And you get to see how they look against them the first time, knowing that their coach was on the other side, their former coach is on the other sideline. The Bills finish with New England, Jets, New England. So I'm wondering, is there a third team that you might feel good using? Because let me tell you, if you can get to the end and you have Tampa and Buffalo, you're going to freaking win this thing. You're in a really, I shouldn't say that. Who knows? Stuff can happen. Things can happen on Christmas, etc. But you're going to be feeling really good, and you're going to have a leg up on everybody. If you've got Buffalo and Tampa left at the end of the season, you'll have some flexibility. So is there another team besides them that catches your eye? I'd challenge you to dig. You got a couple days to figure that out. But Ryan, without spoiling, I just want a yes or no from you. Without spoiling our Bills 49ers preview, because there's some people that are waiting on that. Yes or no, would you rather have Tampa?
Tampa.
Instead of Buffalo? You'd rather have Tampa over Buffalo?
Yep.
Nice. All right, moving on here, folks. We've got Rams at the Saints. Saints are off a bye. They're 2-0 under their new coach, Darren Rizzi. They're playing a lot harder. They're playing with a lot more energy. I don't know what's gotten into Taysom Hill, but he's gone off lately. Could you trust either of these teams in Circa Survivor? I couldn't.
I like the Rams more than I do Tampa.
Whoa. That might be that.
Stephen Flores. You heard it here first. I like the Rams in this game. I think it's anyone's division in the West. I think the Rams feel that. And although their defense obviously has some holes, again, the Saints' best offensive player, Chris Olave, is on IR. The best defensive player they traded away. And yes, they are 2-0 with a new coordinator, but it's, they don't look like world beaters in those two games. They're always going to find ways to lose games. The Saints with Derek Carr. I don't know. I am compelled to tell you that the Rams in this game are going to win.
I like Christian's comment here. Do you think Arizona looks ahead to the division game against Seattle next week? I don't think so, because they can't afford to look ahead. They just lost first place, and they need to win games from here on out. The other one's interesting. Minnesota does have a little bit more of a buffer, a little bit. Do you think Minnesota looks ahead to their game against Kirk Cousins and maybe underperforms this week against the Cardinals?
I think Kevin O'Connell is such a good coach that he'll get those guys playing, 1-0. They want to go 1-0 in the Arizona Cardinal Championship this week, and that's kind of where they're at.
So Steven said the Rams were his third option. He's asking, are you worried about the fact that the Saints are off a bye at home? The Rams are on short rest, and the fact that, the Rams aren't on short rest? Rams played Sunday night. Yeah. So I guess if you include day-wise, they're not on short rest, though. The fact that the Saints have been playing better over the past few weeks, is that a concern that might scare you off? Have you considered all that when you made your prediction about the Rams?
Well, what do the Rams do well? They run the ball well, but they pass the ball really, really well. I look at when the Saints beat Cleveland. Cleveland was throwing the ball all over the field against them. I think Jameis went well over 300 yards, if I'm not mistaken, in that game, and they just found different ways to hand the ball to the Saints. Stafford, I think, has his best game of the year against the Saints secondary, and they're finally getting a little healthier on the offensive line. And again, they recognize they are in the playoff hunt. They are in the division title hunt. And I don't know. I like the Saints to lose against the Rams.
Hey, that is. I don't want to hype anybody up, and I don't want to steer anybody in the wrong direction. If you like the Rams as much as Ryan does, that is a pool winning move, because we could see carnage on Sundays. We absolutely could. And there's not going to be many people on the Rams. So that's fascinating. Although there's a couple people who watch the show. So maybe it's a couple people still in it who watch the show. So maybe a couple people will be. Eagles, Ravens. Ryan, for me, you've said it on this show already. Great game to watch. Highly entertaining. Going to be a lot of fun. I want no piece of it in Survivor whatsoever, especially because the Ravens have massive holiday implications later this season because they play on Christmas. Eagles, man, they might be the best team in the NFL right now. There's an argument to be made for that. That defense is playing really well. That offense put up 37 points without Devonta Smith. Again, don't want to spend too much time on that game, but You got any thoughts on this one, Survivor-wise? I wouldn't touch it.
Well, I do love Philly here, but again, there's better games to bet on. Baltimore's defense is figuring itself out, and Philly, on the other hand, has already figured its defense out, right? I'm waiting, though, to see if Darius Slay plays, because he's a big, you saw that the Rams started picking on, was it the Rams that their backup corner to Slay, he got picked on big time last week, and I'm trying to remember his name. But anyways, so if Slay doesn't play, all bets are off. I'm also wondering if Deontay Johnson is ever going to make a cameo on that offensive. You traded a pretty significant, draft pick for him. I would love to see him utilized. Maybe he's just not that good. I don't know, but
maybe they're slow rolling him. They want to save him for the playoffs. They're saying, hey, you take your time. We don't want to show too much.
Could be, yeah. So anyways, I would stay away, but it's going to probably be the best game to watch this weekend.
Yeah, and good call on the Slay injury. Brandon Graham's also out for the year. So big defensive lineman there for the Eagles. He's going to miss the entire season. All right, you guys have been waiting for this one. 49ers at Bills. Advice number one, keep an eye on the weather in this one. There's some winter storm watches that could be happening. Let's start there, Ryan. If the weather's bad, which team does it favor in your mind?
If the weather is bad,
and let me give you some details. Let's assume there's medium to heavy snow and wind.
So similar to what we saw with Pittsburgh and Cleveland, because I have seen that there's projections that it could be like a snow bomb. We're talking 6+ inches, and unfortunately, I can't speak from experience because I never got to play in like that heavy of snow, despite playing college football in Minnesota outdoors. But who does it? I would say anytime there's that big of weather, it definitely advantage to the underdog, right? I feel like that is the ultimate negator, right, of talent disparity. And although, I don't know, I look at these rosters and I don't see Buffalo as having a better roster, right? I know that, and I know you're going to talk about one of these guys, but Trent Williams allegedly is getting around using a scooter because he's in so much pain. And I mean, I think he would have to die in order not to play, but especially in a big game. But, we said it all year, whenever the San Francisco is against the wall, they win. Whenever you're like, okay, they're starting to figure it out, they lose, right? Yeah. I would argue that if they lose this game, they're kind of done. Yeah. And so I expect it to be spirit. I certainly would not feel good about betting against a team with all this talent, on a Sunday night national televised game. I think Buffalo is still overrated. They really haven't beaten anybody, in my opinion. And I think San Francisco, for what people are saying about them, are underrated. I think, whatever the spread is now, Tony, if it's 7, if it's 10, whatever it is, I think it's too high. It's a must win for San Francisco. I would be urinating down my leg if I had Buffalo as my survivor pick here.
Yeah, and I think there will be a lot of people who do. Interesting from a hedging strategy, if there is carnage on Sunday, you can make more well-informed hedges on Sunday night, knowing exactly how many people have been knocked out. So that's something to consider. And same thing for the Monday night game, because I think people will be on that as well. Stephen Flores says, I think the field is going to be significantly reduced on Sunday. A bunch of the great teams are playing on Thanksgiving and Black Friday. I agree with Tony. It's to reduce the field, but it's so small. Yes, very true. Stephen Flores says, devil's advocate, the 49ers have a ton of injuries. The locker room seems to be broken. Debo and Ayuk look terrible. Well, Ayuk's gone. He's off the field. He's not even playing anymore. He's on IR. Debo does look terrible. We're talking about dropped passes. He's got a little bit of a belly, man. I'm sorry, but Debo doesn't look like he's in great shape to me. He did have that nice kick return that got called back, but he does not look like the same player to me. The injury news that I teased earlier was that not Dre Greenlaw. Well, yeah, we should talk about him too, by the way. But Fred Warner admitted that he's been playing on a fractured ankle, apparently partially fractured ankle. I don't know how this works, since week 4. And it was interesting, Ryan. As soon as I saw that news, I looked at his Pro Football Focus player grades, and they dropped off right after week 4. He was playing at that all-pro level, and then all of a sudden started stinking. So that explains a lot on this 49ers defense that was already out Dre Greenlaw, and Warner hasn't been 100%.
Well, remember the stat I brought up a couple weeks ago when I said that the
Yes.
first few weeks, his coverage, like they completed 2 out of 9 passes, and since then it was 30 out of 30. And that makes sense. Like he is legitimately my favorite player to watch in the NFL. And his first 3 weeks, he was defensive player of the year. Like he was unbelievable.
Yeah, good call. I forgot. Yeah.
And since then, to your point, like, yeah, I mean, but honestly, the fact that he's still playing on a broken ankle, I mean, that is, he's got to take a pain injection every time they shoot him up right before the game. Like, I mean, I can't imagine that. And especially being the quarterback of the defense, he's usually a sideline to sideline guy. They got Trent Williams, who's their, kind of their linchpin on offense. He can't walk. He's got we'll see if he shows up in the game. And then you got Brock Purdy, that's questionable, Tony, for the game.
Yeah, he got a limited practice in today. We'll see if he plays. Let me just go through the updates. So Matt Milano may return for the Bills. He was back at practice. It seems a little early for him to return, but with the game being on Monday, an extra day of practice, there's certainly a chance. Same thing for Dre Greenlaw. He just came back to practice this week, so there's a chance that he could play. It seems a little too early for those guys, but for a desperate team like the Niners, they may push Dre Greenlaw a little bit, especially with Warner banged up. So be interesting to see if those two guys play, especially with Milano, dude. You cannot understate how important that guy is to that defense. Is absolutely huge. But Lenore, the 49ers' number 2 cornerback, also didn't practice today. Their number 1 cornerback, Trevarius Ward, has missed the last 3 weeks because of a death in the family. So we're not sure if he's going to play in this one. So there's a lot of Nick Bosa. We didn't even talk about him. There's a lot to shake out. I'll tell you what, if Purdy doesn't go, and there is a chance, as a commenter said, it's Sunday. My bad. It's not Monday. Yeah. I was thinking primetime game. A commenter said Shanahan might be playing some gamesmanship and maybe Purdy's actually more hurt than he is. That's certainly possible. If Purdy doesn't go, this would be a great spot for Josh Dobbs. A snowy game where the quarterback, it kind of reminds me of a preseason game a little bit, where the quarterback needs to ad-lib a little more. And that's when Josh Dobbs is at his best. So don't assume just because Purdy's out, we're going to see Brandon Allen in there again. I was kind of surprised Dobbs didn't start last week. So it'll be interesting to see how that quarterback situation plays out. I bet there's a bunch of people out there, Ryan, who are saying, if Purdy's in, I'm going to go ahead and take Tampa. If Purdy's out, I'm taking the Bills. And I like that, but just there's a lot of moving parts here, guys. Weather and a bunch of other injuries. So take it all into account before you rush and just make the decision off of whether or not Purdy plays in this one or not.
I actually like that idea for Flores or whoever to really wait as long as you can this week for the pick if you are considering the Bills, San Fran, because there are so many implications. You saw against Green Bay, they looked like a different team because they're so decimated. I will say that Deebo Samuel seems like the type of guy that when people start running their mouth about him and questioning him, he's going to show up. And I think he'll have his best game of the year this week, Sunday Night Football. And I do think that if there is snow, especially if it accumulates, right? I mean, I would think advantage running quarterback for one, because, and Josh Allen does a really good job, but they're planning for that. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a very, very good game and very close game. Fascinating to watch. But I think San Francisco's absolutely alive in this one.
Yeah, I mean, imagine your survivor life is on the line with the snow coming down, sloppy game. It's going to be interesting. Hey, if the weather's really bad, Ryan, this is something that's got to be in the way back of your mind, way back. If the weather got really bad to the point where it was hard to score, doesn't that increase the chances of a tie? And you lose. Ties lose in Survivor. We haven't had a tie yet this year in the NFL, have we? So that's a little scary. You don't want to be going to overtime with your Circa Survivor entry on the line, trying to go for $14 million, and it's snowing in overtime. That's not going to be a good feeling at all.
And two other things, Tony. Two other things. I know you've always talked about. Didn't you used to, last year talk about Josh Dobbs? Doesn't he fumble a lot?
Yeah. Good call. Good. That's a good call. I forgot all about that. Yeah.
I remember you brought that up on Oddshark, our show there. And then secondly, who's got the better kicking game, right? Because it could be a more of a kicking game in that snow. And I don't know what the San Francisco's situation these days with their kicking game, because I know they've had some injuries, they've had some badly missed kicks and things like that. So that's just a few things to think about.
Yeah. Kicking game, and I'd say special teams in general. The 49ers special teams has been awful.
Horrible.
It seems like there's a holding on every single kick or punt return. It's ridiculous. All around. Just they need Danny Smith in San Francisco. That's what they need, man, for sure. Last game up here. Oh, Bills are off a bye too. I think I forgot to mention that. Last game up, Cleveland at Denver, Monday night football game. Because of hedging purposes, I do think there's going to be a lot of people waiting, and this is going to be their selection. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up again, Ryan. See how many people are on Denver here. 12 people have Denver left. Wouldn't be surprised to see 10 to 12 people take Denver here. It's a good spot. Browns do have a little extra rest off the quote-unquote mini bye because they played on Thursday. Jameis is in the media right now. Love him or hate him, you can't scroll on Twitter without seeing Jameis this, Jameis that. Jameis is mixed up. Jameis is on the post-game show on Amazon, this and that. Do you trust Denver here? They're getting a lot of sacks. They're putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback that could rattle a guy like Jameis into making some mistakes. Would you trust Denver?
I like Denver here. I don't love Denver here. Nix is playing within the system really, really well. He impressed me this week. He certainly has improved since week 5 when I watched him against the Raiders the first time. And I think it's going to be a low-scoring game despite good weather being expected in Denver. At night game, it's going to be in the 50s, which, considering it's basically December, that's pretty rare. I think Jameis is going to find a way to lose the game. He should have lost the game against Pittsburgh, and they can't catch interceptions, kind of like Baltimore, same thing. But Denver's defense is just too dynamic. They get after you. They have the ultimate, shutdown corner, and then they lead the league in sacks. And that, in addition to their pass pro, is number 1 in the league, which is obviously Cleveland's number 1. So it's good versus good with Myles Garrett and things like that. Myles Garrett can take over games, but Max Crosby did not even sniff the quarterback for a sack. So I think that Denver's strengths play into Cleveland's weaknesses, and I like Denver.
Hey, going back to that Raiders-Chiefs game real quick, we saw Myles Garrett obviously get up for that game against Pittsburgh. You could tell by his post-game comments that game meant a lot to him. He wanted to prove that he's the best defensive end in the league. Those guys were in the same draft class. Could there be a similar type of competitive nature with Bowers versus Kelce here, where you got Kelce, who's Mr. PR? You can't turn on the TV without seeing Travis Kelce. And Bowers says, I don't know this guy's personality. I don't know if he's got an ego or not, but I could see a scenario where Bowers is like, I want people talking about me after this game, not Kelce. And he goes off. Any chance that happens?
I mean, no, because Bowers isn't that type of guy. I mean, maybe Bowers sees that Kelce caught 10 catches against the Raiders last time and he only had 5 catches. But Kelce came up to him after the game, was like, what you're doing is incredible. You're the future of the tight end. So, it's not like Bowers is salty or anything. And he's one of those guys that's just like going to put his head down, not say anything, like just go to work. And he doesn't get extra motivation. He's not wired that way, at least from what I see in the locker room and things like that. But I know you're looking for any type of angle to
always looking for an edge,
create a narrative for the Chiefs to lose. But I don't see it.
All right, Ryan, give us a recap. Here are the games on Sunday. Give me 2 that you're most comfortable with here.
Yeah. So
strategy aside, just who would you take to survive this week?
Yeah, I feel good about Tampa, and I feel good about the Rams this week.
Tampa and the Rams are your 2 favorites.
And again, okay, I'm going to say Denver and the Rams. I feel better about Denver than I do Tampa, actually. Denver and the Rams are the 2 that I feel good about. That's the lovely thing about the NFL. It's such a crapshoot. Tony, give me your most likely carnage team to lose.
Pull this up again. Washington.
Okay. Yeah.
They're playing bad. Tennessee is not as bad as their record looks. Listen, if you got Washington left, don't let me talk you out of it. Washington could win that game by a lot, but I just got a feeling here that the Titans with that defense, you brought up a good point when you said Washington struggles against physical defenses. That's what the Titans are. They're a very, very physical defense that's underrated for sure. So I think we've done all we can, Ryan, to House and Steven. Best of luck to you guys. I hope that you are back after these 2 weeks. To everybody else hanging on to the Survivor selection count tonight, it's going to be fascinating. I want to see how many people have Detroit and Kansas City available and decide to take Dallas, Green Bay, or other, because it's the risky move that could pay off big. We'll see if we have any heroes here that are trying to win this whole damn thing tomorrow. Best of luck to everybody. Take care.
If anybody wants to check out a more in-depth analysis, check out my Twitter and click on the link to watch. I'm going live in about 40 minutes to talk Raiders Chiefs.
Sweet. And your Twitter handle just popped up there on the screen. Best of luck, everybody. It's going to be fun. Take care.